Hey everyone, Pastor Tim here. It is Wednesday night, and so that means it's time for our Wednesday night Bible study. Thinking Person's Guide to Faith. And I know that it's going to take a little while for people to join me, so we do this every single time we do our Wednesday night things. I just kind of ramble to start with because it takes a while for you to get up to speed with me. So let me talk you through the week ahead here at Grace. Tonight, of course, is our Thinking Person's Guide to Faith Bible study. Tomorrow night is our kind of fun Grace Time family time. We do a song, we do a little story. It's geared to the kids, but the whole family can enjoy it. This week, my granddaughter Matilda helped me write the story and helped me present the story. So that's going to be tomorrow night, 6 o'clock on Facebook. And I also believe it's on YouTube, Grace Time Family Time. It goes about 10 minutes. And then this weekend, it's a worship weekend again, and we're continuing our three-part series on fantastical stories of the Bible and what they mean. We are going to look at the fantastical story of a talking snake. And does the Bible really expect us to believe that snakes talk? Well, we're going to talk about that this weekend. And I hear rumors that the actual talking snake from that story is going to be with us in worship. Won't be at any other church. Community of Grace. I booked it months in advance. If you want to join us for the service online, you can do that starting 5 o'clock on Saturday on YouTube and on Facebook. And once that service goes live at 5 o'clock on Saturday and then on Facebook and YouTube, it's available for you on demand anytime. So you can watch it anytime during the week. If you want to join us in-house in worship, we would love to have you there if you feel comfortable coming. We meet at 9 o'clock and at 10:30. We're still doing RSVPs. Which has been very important because the first service is always sold out, so to speak. And we want to make sure we maintain social distancing. We're still wearing masks. We're keeping protocols in place because we know we're not done with this thing yet. And our commitment to each other as people of grace is to be gracious and put the needs of others ahead of our own. So we want to make sure everybody feels safe, everybody's protected. So until further notice, we will still be RSVPing. We'll wear masks. And I suspect that the 9 o'clock service will fill up, as it always does, and 10:30 always has some space for you. So that's what's coming up. Now, let me talk a little bit about what we're going to do this evening. We have been, on Easter, let me back up. On Easter, I introduced to you the topic of doubt. And I said that doubt is actually good for us, and that doubt can be the doorway to faith. And we looked at some of the resurrection stories and how all of the resurrection stories started with doubt. People just didn't believe that Jesus was alive. And once they opened that door to doubt, they discovered Jesus standing, waiting for them on the other side. And so this series that we're in right now, this 3-week series on these fantastical stories from the Old Testament, the creation stories, these are stories that cause doubt in people. Because we tend we do misinterpret them and misunderstand them, and therefore, because we try to take them literally rather than as metaphor and as symbolism, we miss the point and it just confuses us. So on Wednesday nights, last week and then this week, we have been talking about doubt from a little different perspective. Last week we talked about it from the perspective of how to get at truth. And how difficult it is in these days to get at truth. And we need to doubt the stuff that we're hearing on social media and on cable news and other places, and really make sure that what we're hearing isn't just loud opinion, but it's actually fact. Today, to kind of wrap up this Wednesday night thing on doubt, and then next week we'll do 4 or 5 weeks on the Lord's Prayer, I want to talk to you about belief, faith, and doubt. And I think if you can hang in there with me, I'm going to do a little bit of mind game stuff with you tonight, but there's a reason for it. So I'm going to tell you up front what I'm going to try to tell you or share with you, and then I'm going to tease it out. And so you're going to have to hang on a little bit because this is going to be a little bit like riding a roller coaster because we're going to work on some semantics. But it's important because I want to get us to the point of doubt, which is our starting point for these few weeks. So I'm going to say in just a moment that the Bible doesn't really make a distinction between faith and belief, But I want to make a little distinction because of what I want to say about doubt. So here's what I want to suggest, and then I'm going to tease this out for you. Faith is another word for trust. And trust is not something that we decide to give. Trust is always birthed in us by the trustworthiness of someone else. So, for example, I sit on a chair because the chair has proved itself trustworthy. The chair doesn't hold me up because I believe it will. I believe it will because the chair proves that it's always going to be faithful in holding me up. And because the chair is trustworthy, it births trust in me. So same is true with God. Faith is not a decision I make. Faith is a gift that God births in me by proving God's self trustworthy. And as God proves faithful, that creates trust in me. Faith is a gift. Belief or beliefs are things that I think about God or ascribe to God. So let me say it this way, just to confuse you a little bit, and then I'll confuse you more, and then hopefully unconfuse you. It is possible to trust in God and yet have toxic beliefs about God. There are people who have faith in God, but they believe it's okay to hate in the name of God. They believe it's okay to judge others in the name of God. They believe it's okay to kill others in the name of God. They have a deep faith, a deep trust in God, but their beliefs about God are toxic. It's also possible to have beliefs about God. I could believe that God is a good God, a creative God, and not necessarily trust in God, not live my life on the basis of God. And so that's what I want to tease out a little bit, that there's a difference between trust that God creates in us, living in relationship with God, and then the things I believe about God, and why this is important. So I'm going to just tell you some stories. We're going to work through that, and then hopefully get to the punchline, okay? So some of you have heard me share this story before. It's a story about a famous tightrope walker. And he put a rope from one end of Niagara Falls to the other. Put on a big show. Hundreds and hundreds of people out to see it. And so the first time he, held his pole and he walked from one side of the Niagara Falls to the other and back again on that tightrope. And people cheered. And he said, now how many of you believe that I can push a wheelbarrow across on the tightrope from one end to the other? And they all, yeah, we believe. And so he pushed the wheelbarrow from one end of the Niagara Falls and back again on that tightrope. And so he asked again, how many of you believe that I can push that wheelbarrow across? Of course, they'd just seen it, so they believed. He said, how many of you believe that I can push a person in that wheelbarrow back and forth across the tightrope, across the Niagara Falls? And everybody said, we believe. And he said, do I have any volunteers? Not a one. You see, they believed certain things about him, but they didn't necessarily have faith in him. Okay? We're going to work with that. The story illustrates a little bit the difference between belief and faith. So I did a little research. Here is a way to define belief. A belief is an intellectual acceptance of facts. Or it may even be embracing an opinion. It may be embracing a judgment, and I'm fully committed to it, to that belief. Faith is acting on the beliefs. It's putting my money where my belief is. It's placing my trust in the thing in which I believe. So I might believe that chairs hold people up, but until I actually sit in a chair, I haven't expressed faith in the chair. I believe it will hold people up, but I haven't put my faith in it. I haven't trusted it. So I might believe that he can push a person across on a wheelbarrow, but until I get in the wheelbarrow, I haven't put my trust in him, all right? So that's a subtle difference between belief and faith. Belief is ascribing something or believing something about a person. Faith is actually putting my money where my belief is, trusting, giving my life to it. So, let's go at this again. What are some things that you believe about a jet airplane? Okay, so you think about a jet. You might believe that it's big. You might believe that it can fly. You might believe that it's comfortable. You might believe it's uncomfortable. You might believe that it is a fun ride. You might believe it's a scary ride. And depending on your perspective, all of those beliefs are probably true. I've been on some really fun plane rides. I've been on some terrible plane rides, right? All of those things are probably true. Those are beliefs about the plane. But believing something about the plane and getting on the plane and flying on the plane are two totally different things. One is my mental assent to the plane. The other is the entrusting of my life to that plane. It's the difference between belief and faith. Now, let me turn it upside down a little bit, okay? Please hang in there with me. I'm going to make my point here. Just give me a couple hours. 3 people board a commercial airliner to travel to a distant city. The first is an engineer who designs and builds airplanes. He is also a pilot. He knows how everything works. Furthermore, he is a personal friend of the pilot who will be flying that afternoon, and he knows him to be very competent. He boards the plane with full confidence. The second person is just the average business traveler. She knows a little bit about airplanes, but just doesn't think about it too much. She takes her seat and starts reading a magazine. The third person is deathly afraid of flying. He breaks out in a cold sweat. It takes all he can do not to turn and fly or flee down the gangway. With much fear and trembling, he gets on the plane, sits down, and hopes he can fall asleep and not wake up until they land. So the question is, who has more faith in the plane? The answer is that they all have the same amount of faith. All of the people who got under the plane were committing themselves to the plane. They had faith in the plane, regardless of their beliefs about the plane. All right? So let me say it another way. The plane flew in spite of their beliefs. It wasn't their beliefs that caused the plane to fly. The plane flew because that's what planes do. No matter what those people believed about it, the plane flies because that's what planes do. And as we experience that plane flying and staying in the air over and over again, it begins to create trust in us. Now, I may not necessarily believe everything about the plane, but if I'm on the plane, regardless of what I believe about it, I've placed my trust in it. And the plane is going to fly whether I believe it will or not. So in the Bible, as I said before, there's not a huge difference between faith and belief, often used interchangeably. But there were times that people had right beliefs about Jesus, but didn't necessarily follow him or place their trust in him. And so there's these real subtle differences. Beliefs are the things that I accept as true. Faith is betting my life on something or someone. So, for example, I believe I should eat a healthy diet. That's my belief. My act of faith is to actually eat a healthy diet. I believe cigarettes will kill me. I believe that, but I keep smoking. So I'm not acting on my beliefs. So faith in Jesus includes beliefs about Jesus, but again, it's a little nuanced, right? You can believe things about Jesus and still not put your faith in him. And you can put your faith in Jesus and believe things about Jesus that may or may not be right or wrong. I'm getting to doubt here in a moment. In fact, let me get to it right now as an example. One of the main causes of doubt, and I mentioned this in my Easter message, is a faith crisis, where we're at a point in our lives where we need God to act, we need God to be there, and God disappoints us, God lets us down, God doesn't show up, God is absent. But here's the real question. Is it God who disappointed me, or my beliefs about God that disappointed me? Is it God who let me down, or is it my understanding of who God is that let me down? Is it God who disappointed me, or is it the beliefs that others have about God that have disappointed me? You see, it's in the Bible, it's not my beliefs about God that lead to faith. It's God's faithfulness that creates faith in me. And as I live in relationship with God, who is creating faith in me, my beliefs about God can and should change over the course of our relationship together. The plane is going to fly whether I believe it or not, because that's what planes do. And God is going to continue to love me and be gracious to me and care for me, because that's what God does, regardless of my beliefs. But hopefully, in my relationship with God, as God is forging faith in me, my beliefs will grow and change and shift. So here's my point, and then this will take us really to my emphasis in this little study, to invite you to doubt. God never changes, but my beliefs about God do and should. And we even see that in the Bible. Sometimes people will say the God of the Old Testament is so very different than the God in the New Testament. And that's not really the case. We can go back, and if we do a really good, thorough study of the Old Testament, we find out God is exactly the same. It's just that people's perceptions of God throughout the Old Testament evolve as they get to know God better. And ultimately, we see in Jesus what God is really like. But even in the Bible, people's perceptions of God change. Even for the disciples, their perceptions of Jesus changed over the course of time. Jesus never changed, but their beliefs about Jesus changed. So faith isn't something that I conjure up. Faith is something God creates in me. Again, I sit on a chair because the chair has proved itself faithful. I fly on a jet because the jet proves itself faithful, regardless of what I believe about it. And Jesus loves me regardless of what I believe about Jesus. And so here's my point. It is not only good to doubt and to ask questions about what we believe about God, it's really important that we do that. And to do it from the safety of knowing that it's not my beliefs that determine my salvation, so to speak. It's God's love for me. It's God's faithfulness. I'm secure in that. God's faithfulness holds me. God's faithfulness creates faith in me. But if I want to take my relationship with God seriously, then I need to trust in doubt as well. And to ask big questions about what God is like. This God who holds me, what is God like? And I need to constantly challenge my thinking. And that's why we're doing a Thinking Person's Guide to Faith. Are the things that I believe about God really biblical? Are they really in line with who God is? There are things that I believed about God years ago that I don't believe anymore, and they actually kind of embarrass me. Because my views of God were dictated more by God is angry at us and is begrudgingly forgiving, to the point I'm at now where God is gracious and that God can only respond to us out of grace, never out of anger, because God is a God of love. God is love. Now, God didn't love me more or less when I had these angry views of God, but God walked with me and created doubt in me, these things that I believed about God. Am I really sure this is what God is like? And God has taken me on a journey. And so the good news is Jesus loves you regardless of what you believe about Jesus, and that gives you the freedom then to wrestle with the things that you do believe about God and allow God to stretch you. Dare I say it? Are we willing to be stretched when it comes to what we believe about God and homosexuality? Are we willing to be stretched about what we believe about God and this passion God seems to have to send people to hell? Are we willing to be stretched in our beliefs about God in terms of who is in and who's out as far as God is concerned? Are we secure enough in God's love for us that we're willing to even ask questions about Genesis and the creation story and the talking snake story, and maybe see that there are different ways of looking at those stories that are more faithful to who God is? That's what doubt does. Doubt is not the abandonment of our faith. Doubt is growing in our faith, in our beliefs. And so in the security of knowing that God loves you and God holds you, and that's trust, we have this freedom to wrestle with the things we believe about God. And sometimes what we believe about God will be confirmed, and sometimes it will change. That's what doubt does for us. Here's how Martin Luther says it. Faith is a living, bold trust in God's grace, so certain of God's favor that it would risk death 1,000 times trusting it. Such confidence and knowledge of God's grace makes you happy, joyful, and bold in your relationship with God and all creatures. The Holy Spirit makes this happen through faith. Because of it, you freely, willingly, and joyfully do good to everyone, serve everyone, suffer all kinds of things, love and praise the God who has shown you such grace. Thus, it is just as impossible to separate faith and works as it is to separate heat and light from fire. Ask God to work faith in you, or you will remain forever without faith, no matter what you wish, say, or can do. So faith is something that Jesus gives to us as a gift. His love, His grace and mercy, and that gives us the freedom then to grow in our faith and what we believe about God. So faith is not an intellectual embracing of ideas. That's the work of beliefs. Faith is a relationship with God that God initiates with us through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Faith is rooted in God's faithfulness, in God's call on our life, in God's grace. And it's out of that relationship that we're allowed to doubt and question and wrestle with our beliefs about this God who holds us and loves us. So doubt is an invitation really to follow Jesus, to grow in your understanding of who Jesus is, to rethink, to let the Spirit of God invade your beliefs and mold and shape you with the kind of beliefs that put you in tune with the heart of God. God's grace will always hold you. God's grace will always keep you as you are on this journey to grow in your understanding of who God is. All right? Now, I promise you that starting next Wednesday, we're going to take a little mental break, and we're going to go for more inspiration, all right? Still a thinking person's guide to faith, but we're going to tease out some of the meaning behind the Lord's Prayer. And I think we've got, if I remember right, we've got 4 or 5 weeks, and then we're going to change things up for the summertime, okay? I want to remind you, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on Facebook and on YouTube, we've got a fun little Grace Time family time for all ages, featuring my granddaughter Matilda. You won't want to miss it. And then on this weekend, Saturday, live streamed at 5 o'clock on Facebook and YouTube, and then on demand afterwards, we're going to be looking at the fantastical Bible story of a talking snake and what all the different metaphors in that story mean about life as we live it. You can also join us in-house if you'd like, Sunday at 9 o'clock or 10:30. Go to boldrecklessgrace.org/worship, boldrecklessgrace.org/worship to RSVP. We're still wearing masks, and if you're comfortable, we'd love to have you come. If not, that's why we're online. We'll always be online for you. And we know that once we're back to full services, there'll be weekends you can't come. We'll still be online for you. All right, thanks so much for joining me. If this was helpful for you at all, share it with your friends on your Facebook page. We'll see you this weekend. God's best to you.